Welcome to Sales for Nerds. I'm your host and chief nerd, Ruben Swartz. If you started a business because you love serving clients but realized you didn't like the sales and marketing aspect of running that business so much, this is the podcast for you. Sales and marketing doesn't have to suck. It can actually be a lot of fun. And on this show, we're going to teach you how to connect instead of network, teach instead of market, help instead of sell, so you can keep serving people even while you're building your pipeline and growing your business. Now let's get to it. All right. Today, I'm super excited to have with me Kari Mirabal. She is an international keynote speaker, TEDx presenter, author, and consultant who specializes in something that I believe is called naked networking. And you'll notice that we are not naked. We are, in fact, wearing matching orange shirts, which is a whole new level for this podcast. And Kari does not have anything in her glass today. I have got some Domaine Guyon from Bourgogne in the Loire. It's a nice Cab Franc. And so I will be doing the honors for both of us. Kari, it's wonderful to have you here. Welcome to Sales for Nerds.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Great. Now, for Naked Networking, I don't have to take off this orange shirt, do I?
No, you do not.
Okay.
Do
Tell me
not.
a little bit more about that, because I feel like so many of us rely on networking for our business, for life in general, and we tend to be bad at it and have a bad attitude about it, so I'm told, and then we don't do it well. What should we be thinking about, and how do we get naked without actually getting naked?
Love it. So, yes, my signature keynote is called Naked Networking, and it really started from my own history of hating networking. So, it's kind of funny because I'm a keynote speaker here in America, public speaking, but I think networking is like number two. Most people would rather get like a root canal than go to a networking event. And I was that person. And so over time, I learned some strategies that started to work for me, and I started to get some wins. And when I looked back and I thought, why did I hate this so much? Because now I'm addicted and I love helping people and people helping me. It was because I felt exposed and bare and essentially naked, right? I felt uncomfortable. So I thought it would be a fun way to help people remember. Naked is actually it's an acronym, and it stands for the 5 common mistakes that people make when they network. And we can go through those 5 through our podcast today. But it's just a fun way to remember not only the mistakes that most people make in solutions, but also how does it make us feel when we talk to strangers? So I'm in the business of helping people learn to push past fear and get a little bit more confident when they talk to people, because the gifts on the other side are so amazing that I want to turn even more people onto the concept. So that's kind of the premise of naked networking. And it's fun. It looks great on the marquee.
So to take us back a little bit to when you were dreading the networking, because I think that's the state that most of us are in. And before they think you're some kind of guru who just descended from a mountaintop, tell us about Kari, the person who hated networking.
Absolutely. So I worked for a telecommunications company, was my first official career. And at the time, now I'm going to date myself here, thanks. No internet, no smartphone, no social media back in the day. And the manager that I worked for made us go to these events. And we were supposed to talk to people, but of course, there was not a lot of training. So I would walk in and I just remember feeling scared of rejection. I remember not knowing what to say to someone. I also remember if somebody talked to me, I didn't know how to walk away from the conversation
Mm-hmm.
without feeling rude. So everything was awkward about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I realized, there's a lot more people in the room that probably feel the way I feel too, and that it's okay. And sometimes, like in my coaching, I tell people it's okay to kind of take a weakness and turn it into a strength. So when I had the courage to approach people and say, I'm not very good at networking, could I join your conversation? I'm a little nervous. Most people would be like, sure, come on over, talk to us. We don't bite. And I learned that little small acts of kindness, most people are open to talking to you. You just have to have the courage to go for the ask. So that's why I wrote the book and I do this keynote, because it's fun to get people thinking in different ways about what networking really is. And it's about developing mutually beneficial relationships. It's not just like what's in it for me, or think that it's synonymous with sales, and it's not. There's a lot of benefits in networking that have nothing to do with sales. So
I think that's a great point. I think there's so many of us who have been in those rooms and you're kind of like, gosh, I don't know anyone here. My boss told me I need to go get a bunch of leads. And
Yeah,
then that leads to some very awkward conversations that aren't productive for sales anyway,
right,
make you have a miserable experience, and the whole vicious cycle continues. And then sometimes you run into other people who are clearly in that boat, but you don't know how to gel and just relax and have a good time. So everyone's trying to stab each other in the face with business cards, and it's not a great time. Now, what
right.
should we be doing? What are the things that we should remember that I think we're gonna know from the naked mnemonic?
I think that the most important thing somebody can do is get curious. So when you walk into an event, get curious about who's there. And one of the things I like to do is I look at it as an adventure. I know that sounds corny, but when I meet people, I think, gosh, I wonder where this will go. I wonder how I can help them or how they can help me or who I know that can help other people connect. And so for me, I guess I kind of gamify it and I get curious about how we can pay it forward is really the concept, because I'm one of those people that enjoys helping other people and being a servant leader. So when you get curious about people, I think it's finding commonality. So you have some things to talk about. Where are you from? You know, do you have kids? Where do you like to vacation? What brought you to the conference? What did you think of the speaker? What did you like? What did you not like? And just in the process of having regular conversations, most people will find they have a lot in common, more than they think, with every person in the room. So it's a matter of just kind of thinking, how can I serve someone else first? And I think people go into it thinking they feel like desperate or needy. But I think most people are honored when you ask them, would you be willing to help me with this? Or could you answer this question? Or would you share your knowledge with me? Most people are honored by that question. So we just can't be afraid to ask it. Does that make sense? That's kind of my approach.
I think there's a big difference between, hey, Carrie, share some knowledge about networking. I'd really appreciate that. And I think our audience would too, versus, hey, Carrie, you really should give me some money to buy my thing.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And and the questions are, how can I be of service to you? You know, and what would be a good prospect for you? And you know, maybe I know someone that can help you get from point A to point B faster. How can I help you fill that need? And it's kind of fun to be the first person to offer your services so that other people can kind of think to themselves like, gosh, you know, I'm looking for this or that. And what's interesting is I talk a lot about my sons. I have two boys, and well, they're men now, 24 and 21. But my youngest son, he actually played baseball in our state for the number one baseball team. He wanted to get into the orthopedics field. And so I had a friend that was in the business. And I remember my son was like, Mom, I don't have anything in common with that guy. How am I going to talk to him? Because if you're in my family, you've been networking since you were like itty bitty, right? So this is like a trait that I wish I would have learned when I was younger. So my kids are learning it now. Well, in talking to this gentleman, he found out that his son played baseball. And so now they're talking about baseball. And it ended up that he was helping this guy's son with some tips for how to try out for the team. So even at the time, a 19-year-old had something in common with this particular guy's son. And that actually led to an opportunity where my son got the internship at that orthopedics company. And guess who gave him the big plug? That guy, because he started off with, here, let me tell you some hints on how to get on the baseball team. And so everybody has something they can offer, no matter what age, your education, your title, your industry. And so I think those are some fun lessons for people to think about as they're going through the experience.
That makes sense. So let's dive into it. What does naked stand for?
Okay, well, we'll start with N stands for neglect. A lot of people, so these are the most common mistakes. So I've traveled all over the country in Canada. I started out in the IT recruiting industry. So I gather all my data from 20 plus years of experience talking to people. And I find that a lot of people neglect to keep their network active, thinking, oh, well, I don't need a job. So why would I want to network? And
Mhm.
then what happens? They go to work, the unexpected happens, they get their pink slip, and now all of a sudden, I don't have any connections or contacts that can help me. And now we're in that desperate mode, which is not
Mhm.
good. So, neglect is a very big mistake that a lot of people make. So, the solution for that one, just simplified version, is it's okay to slow down your networking efforts, but don't ever stop. Don't ever stop. So that's the first one. The next one is afraid. And people are afraid to talk to strangers. And that's a big one. Trying to overcome that barrier in my line of work is probably the biggest challenge because of all the voices in our head that tell us those stories, those negative triggers, right? And so when you feel afraid, what I have found is 8 out of 10 people say they're afraid of rejection.
Mhm.
And so I tell my clients up front, it's par for the course. Not everybody that you want to network with is going to have that mutually beneficial spirit. And it's okay. But you have a 50-50 chance if I ask you a question that you're going to answer it yes or no. And I like those odds. So I encourage people to face their fear. And I have a process that I use that I talk about in my book and also on stage, which is called the LTR. It stands for the lie, and then reframe. So, what is the lie that you're telling yourself when you walk into a networking event and you see someone and you're like, oh, I really want to talk to them, but they don't want to talk to me, or I don't have anything of value, or I don't have the same education that they do. And you already talk yourself out of the process before you even go over there. And a lot of people do that. So, you have to identify the lie, and then you have to tell yourself a truth statement. You know what? Maybe they'll think, maybe they'll be interested, or maybe they will help me, or it's just a question and they can always say no if they don't want to help. And then we have to reframe. So I ask a question, I introduce myself. Maybe they'll give me points for being brave, right? So, hey, you never know, nothing ventured, nothing gained. I'm a go big or go home kind of girl. So I encourage my clients to really walk through those steps when they feel afraid. And it kind of helps them push through it and identify those stories in their head, right?
Mhm.
Knowledge is the next one. A lot of people don't have the knowledge or the strategy to be able to talk to strangers. And so I offer a 3-step networking strategy, and I say it's plan, connect, and grow. So plan, who do you want to talk to and why? You have to kind of have a plan of action when you go to a networking event. Like, what's my best possible outcome? Who do I
Mhm.
want to meet here today? Or who do I want to ask these people? Is there anyone in your network who does this line of work? Or do you know anyone in your network who would be interested in hiring a keynote speaker? Or I do master classes. Would that be of interest to anyone that you know of, any event planners in your network? So kind of having a strategy before you go into a networking event is really important. And then that whole connection piece. Is it going to be better to ask for an introduction, or maybe email the person, or message them on LinkedIn? So there's a lot of different channels that you can use to connect with the person you're trying to reach, whether it's in person or online. And so I have a lot of clients that do a lot of LinkedIn training. And I tell people, if you're messaging the person on LinkedIn 3 or 4 times a week and they're not responding, they probably aren't getting the message. So you've got to mix your media and try a different way to reach them. So plan, connect, and then the last piece is grow. You have to always be growing your network, and that means serving the people in your network and being of value. And so I think it's important to think that most people that have struggles with networking, you want to have an even distribution of planning, connecting, and growing. But a lot of people, like, I come from IT background, so a lot of my IT clients, they are my muse for doing this work because they were some of them socially awkward, didn't feel comfortable.
No idea what you're talking about.
I know, no idea at all, right? And I say geeks and nerds with respect because they're the reason why I'm in this business. Because when I was recruiting, I would have to help them prepare for interviews, and they would get so nervous talking to strangers. So I would say to them, at some point, you want to spend a third of your time actually connecting, and a third of your time growing the relationship once it's there. What most people do is they get stuck. They get stuck in like the planning phase, because to shake a hand or introduce yourself to someone is the intimidating part. So ideally, you want to have an equal distribution of your time when you're networking for optimal success. And most people I talk to will be able to identify where they're lacking in that knowledge piece. So that's the knowledge in Naked. The E in Naked stands for engage. And what I find is people are, quite frankly, just a little socially awkward, or maybe they approach someone and they're not authentic. So I always tell people, just be yourself. And again, if you're uncomfortable, it's okay to say, hi, my name is Kari. I'm new here. I don't know anyone. Can I join your conversation? Or just kind of accept that there's that level of nervousness, but most people are nervous too. And it's better to just throw it out there than it is to, I think, go to an event and you're like, oh, the weather, what do you guys do? It's like be a human, not a
Mhm.
robot. And I think a lot of people will benefit when they just put their true energy out there, because when you are your true authentic self, the right energy will come into your universe. And I've always believed that. So be authentic when you engage with people and let them know what your goal is. So, and I'm in the business of sales too, with my keynotes, my masterclass, and my individual coaching. I tell people, look, I'm just telling you, I'm not selling you. If my services are of interest to you, fantastic. Let's keep talking. But if not, that's okay too. So the hard sale is just really awkward for everybody. And I think the way to engage people authentically is to try to find commonality. So right now I live in Oklahoma, for example, and we have two schools, OSU and OU, and they're kind of the big rivals, right? So a lot of times if I see someone that attends OU, I will say, "Oh, well, my son goes to OSU. Are we going to have problems, because this is kind of the thing?" Or I'll look in their background and say, "Oh, I'm from Illinois. I see you're from Illinois." Or, "Oh, you're a volunteer on this board. I'm a volunteer on that board." Or, "I was a Big Brother, Big Sister Foundation volunteer for many years. I see you did that as well." And that's what I love about LinkedIn. It can help you find that commonality that you have. And also that tool, it will aggregate who you know that the other person knows as well. So it's really interesting to say, wow, how do you know this person? Oh, that's my neighbor. Or, oh, I go to church with that person. Or, oh, that's my son's best friend's mom or whatever. And so I love that you can use that platform to find that commonality. And I usually tell people, start there, because when people have things in common, they start to like each other. And when people like each other, they over time they start to trust. And when the trust is there, then the opportunities start to open. And I've spent 20 years in my career helping people find jobs in the unpublished job market, which means what? Jobs that come through your network. And so a lot of times it's who you know and what they're willing to do for you. So
Mhm.
having that commonality kind of opens the door for further conversation. And then the last piece is dedicate. And so, like any business habit, it has to be something that you do consistently. And a lot of people say, well, I don't have time to network. And I always say, well, you don't have time not to network. I can't imagine if I didn't network. I mean, it helps me get where I need to go so much faster. So I tell people 15 minutes a day, every day, to move the needle in your networking efforts, whether that's on LinkedIn or just picking up the phone and making contact with people, sending a quick email. Or what I love about LinkedIn is you can post content where you can be of service and create value within your network by putting, or, "Hey, I'm going to this conference," or, "Here's a great quote," or, "Here's an article that I read about leadership. Maybe it will help you too." So you want to look for ways that you can create value to your network and kind of create that reputation as being that professional that's going to help people, but you have to make it part of your daily practice. And I believe if you do that in 15 minutes or less a day, it can really help you move that needle faster than you think. So that's kind of the 10,000-foot view of what the NAKED acronym stands for and some basic solutions for each one of those areas. I know it's a lot.
No, I think, at least for me, all of those things resonate, and I'm guessing that for people listening, they're gonna recognize all too much of that in themselves. And I
Yeah.
think part of the challenge is when I started doing this stuff, it was kind of like you. I would get sent by my boss to a conference to generate business.
Mm.
So it was already a high pressure situation that I was not in control of, that I felt awkward in, etcetera. And it just sort of compounded things, and it kind of went back to being authentic, right? Like when you start feeling nervous and then you put a mask on, even if you're not doing it for nefarious purposes, people can tell that there's something off, right? That you're not being authentic, and the trust just goes away. And one of the things I realized is there's definitely a place for giant networking events or small networking events or whatever, but networking does not have to be something you do at somebody else's event on someone else's terms. We can do
Exactly.
it on our own terms in a way that's comfortable for us. So as an introvert, I realized that I actually love having conversations with people. I just hate having them at giant conferences.
Right. Right.
But I can pick up the phone and talk to people. Like I have a freaking phone
Yeah.
on me at almost all times, right? And to your point, if you spend 15 minutes a day and have a couple of conversations with people, it's not going to be it's like you're nurturing your garden and it's fun.
Right.
It's
It's
there's
not
no
as
pressure, you're helping other people, and before you know it, you're like, "Oh, this isn't so bad." And then the next time you go to the conference, you know some of these people because you've actually let those relationships bloom instead of being a bunch of strangers that you talked to 5 years ago, but you haven't spoken to since, where I think a lot of us fall down, right? Like you shake everyone's hand and exchange business cards. Maybe you have a one follow-up conversation, but then what happens? Nothing, and it kind of just withers away.
right. And that's the grow piece, right? So, like, what I love about LinkedIn too is that you can message people. Like, if you're going to the conference, hey, who's going to be in Atlanta? I'm like, next month, I'm speaking at a
Mhm.
conference in Atlanta. So, I go on LinkedIn and I put, hey, I'm going to be at this conference. Are you going to be there too? And I use the hashtags and everything. And then people might say, yeah, I'm going to be there. And I'll say, oh, great. And then I'll look at their profile and say, hey, let's grab a corner and have a 5 minute chat while we're there. So, before I even go to events, I usually have, 5, 10, 15 people that I've already message before I even get there to say, hey, let's grab a corner, or let's plan to meet up when we're there. And that eases a lot of the fear as well when you have a plan of action before you even get there. And that's part of the fun. Like sometimes, I'll give you an example. I was invited to speak at a conference. I'm getting ready to go to Winnipeg, and I met this person online 3 years ago, and they became a client, and I did some career coaching and some networking coaching with this individual, and here we are 3 years later, and he ends up being an executive at this association, and I have never even met this person. 3 years we've been on the phone or on LinkedIn, and now I get to meet them in Winnipeg for this conference. And it's crazy because I feel like I already know this person
Hmm?
so well before I get there that I'm not even nervous at all about it. And I think if people kind of realize networking takes time. We have this gumball mentality, I call it, where you put a quarter in and you get your immediate treat. Doesn't work that way. It's patience, which I don't have a lot of, but you have to be patient, and you have to be persistent, and you have to practice, which a lot of people don't understand. Networking is an art. And like anything, you've got to put the time in to practice. And are you going to put your foot in your mouth? Yes. Are you going to say things like, "Ooh, that didn't sound very good"? But it's okay to know that you're going to fall, but the more you practice and the more you get out there, the more comfortable you become. And like I said, you know I even get nervous about it sometimes still. And I'll give you another example. I was in Washington DC, and I met one of my clients is in the Air Force. I'll just put it like that. And I was so intimidated. I was in this room with these people that are like talking about quantum physics and all these things, and I was just like, and I was so nervous because I thought, I don't have anything, like I can't speak at their level. But then I realized everybody is ignorant just on different subjects, right? So if you ask a fish, hey, how do you climb a tree? The fish doesn't know because it doesn't climb trees, right? And then you think, oh, the fish is ignorant. No, everybody has different skills and different gifts that the universe has given them. And so it's okay to kind of, I told those folks, I was like, I am intimidated to even be in the room with you all. But one thing I do know is I do know how to present, and I do know how to capture an audience. And so they had hired me to do some speaker coaching for them. And then I felt comfortable because I realized I'm giving my gift to them and they're giving their gift to the world. And so we all kind of are interconnected, and we can all help each other get where we're trying to go once we put ego to the side and we operate out of what I call more the soul. Like, how can I be of service? So it's
I
a
think
fun business. I love it.
I think that's a great point, and I want to go back to something you talked about earlier, which is practice. Because one of my
Yeah.
pet peeves is I have a lot of sympathy, and I've screwed this up so many times. But it's like you go to the networking thing, and somebody's like, "What I do is blah 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 blah," and they give like just the worst stumbling explanation of what they do.
Yeah.
You have no idea what they do or who they want to meet or anything, and
Right.
it's really just awkward. And so if you do that once, twice, 3 times, totally understandable. But I have been to situations where I'm like, this person comes to this meeting every week and has stood up and said this thing 50 times, and it's the same crap.
Yep.
Like, do yourself a favor and get some feedback so you can talk about yourself. You don't have to brag, but at least somebody should understand. You should be able to explain to people what the heck you do.
So now I'm going to challenge you. Because my question for you is when you went to that person and said, hey, I have a suggestion, maybe come up with a tagline or something that will help you get your message across a little bit more effectively. What did they say?
Well, so I didn't say that,
Exactly.
right? Because I don't know them. But there are people that I know or that I
Yeah.
develop relationships with. I'm like, hey, I don't think what you're saying really captures the essence of what you do. I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit.
Right. And I think it's all in languaging and delivery, right? We talk about how do we engage people. I see that sometimes what I'll say is, hey, are you open to feedback? And if they're like, sure, I think you have a great message, but I feel like it's not landing on people. And I wondered, like, perhaps maybe would you ever consider coming up with maybe a different tell me about yourself statement? And I'm happy to help. I'm really big in my business on taglines. So, like, my tagline is I teach people how to network smarter. Nike, just do it, right? So it's important for each of the clients that I work with to have a tagline on their resume, on their networking, on their business card, on their LinkedIn. It's a tagline. My son, he does like software development. So his on LinkedIn it says, I help end users increase efficiency and effectiveness through programming. So he's helping companies make money and save money because the programs that he develops are streamlining operations. So to be able to go to an event and say, I help companies streamline business with programming systems that I develop. I mean, that's powerful. And anybody can come up with that. Chat GPT is a great friend these days for suggestions, and then you can make it your own. But I am with you on that. So when I see a need, I try to fill a need and I try to do it tenderly so the person doesn't feel like I'm being judgmental, because I come from a place of I really want to help you get your
Mm-hmm.
message out there. And if you're open to feedback, maybe we could work together on that. And then your business can blossom even more. But a lot of people won't say anything. So those who don't have self-awareness, they wander the world not realizing that that's an area of opportunity for them.
Yeah, very true. And I usually, if I end up in conversation with them, I usually say something like, oh, tell me more, because it sounds like what you do applies to like all 8 billion of us. Who's an
Yes.
ideal client for you?
I love that. Tell me more, or I'm curious about what you do, or are you open to this? And I think when said in the right, that's what I tell my kids when they were growing up. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. And I think a lot of times people are more open to feedback when you come from a tender place of servant leadership. So that's what I encourage people to do, and just kind of lean in. People are surprised when I tell them, just own it. I really don't want to be here. I'm stressed out. This is something I have to do, and I'm trying to have a better attitude about it. So thank you for talking to me. Or, thank you for letting me join the conversation. I was really, really nervous to meet new people, but you're making it more comfortable for me. And I think when we show that kind of grace, it really is contagious, because I find that most people in these events, they're feeling the same way. They're just not articulating it. So,
And most people, I think, in most situations would like to be helpful,
right.
especially when it's as simple as, oh, please join our conversation. Tell us about where you're from.
Yep.
Right? It doesn't mean they're going to give you the big $1 million contract. If that's what you're expecting, good luck. But come in and have the conversation. Absolutely.
Right. And keep the questions open ended. So I learned that from raising teenagers. How was school? Fine. Say, what was the most exciting thing that you did at school today? Or, why are you here? What's your best possible outcome while you're here at this conference? Or what are you hoping to achieve? Or what is something that's really exciting for you at work right now?
Hmm.
And let's be honest, there are just people in the world who have zero interest. They were like me when I was younger. I was just in the corner. I didn't want anybody to talk to me, and I didn't want to talk to anybody. And the sad part about that is if that's how people are, they have to come to their own awareness. We probably can't convince them. So move on. Find the people that, matter most to the people who matter most to you. And continue to look, because I guarantee you there are people in that room that will benefit from what you share and what you have to say. So sometimes you have to move on. If you don't feel like that relationship is really going anywhere, you can't get somebody to talk if they don't want to talk.
Well, let's
So,
talk about the opposite problem that you raised earlier, which is how do you gracefully exit a conversation that
right.
has more than run its course?
Yeah, this comes up a lot. And I tell people, just be honest. It was nice to meet you. I'm going to move on and meet some other people at the event. If you I hope to see you later, or something like that. Just keep it kind of short, because networking is about connecting with people, but it's also about disconnecting with people sometimes when it's just not a fit. I always tell people, always be of service to other people, but there are those in the world that will just take, and they never reciprocate.
Mhm.
So sometimes you just have to have that conversation that's tough. Like, Jane, thanks for coming to me for the last 3 times I've given what I thought was some pretty good advice, but I'm still waiting on that referral over at the 501(c)(3) that I'm trying to get an introduction to. Where are we with that?
Mhm.
Kind of put it back on them that this is about mutually beneficial relationships. And in order to do that, you don't want to develop a relationship as someone that's just taking all the time, because that's where networking gets that bad reputation. What's in it for me? And that's the opposite of what we want to be doing.
Yeah, and I think that whole notion of connecting people together is one of the amazing things about networking. And I think, when you go and you're like, I've got to go close $1 million deal, let me stab some people with a business card, and
Yeah.
why is it this not happening? Like that doesn't work well. But you're talking about how, regardless of what you're doing, networking is going to help you get there faster because it just taps into such a larger pool of
Yes.
brain power than we have. And I have a little calculator on my website, which is like, what is your maximum social network? And depending on how many people you talk to and how much time you have to talk to them and how often you want to talk to them and all blah, 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 blah. Here's how many people you can realistically nurture relationships with. And most people are shocked that it's actually fairly low, like it's in the low hundreds.
Mhm.
But if you do that, you then have access to the network of those people, which is where the
Right.
real power is. And if instead, what people often try to do is they have too many shallow relationships that don't build the trust that you really need to access the broader network. So sure, you've pushed it to 500 people or whatever that but none of them are referring. None of them call you
Right.
up and say, I noticed something that you would be interested in. None of them will pick up the phone when you call and spend half an hour just helping you work through a problem that has nothing to do with business directly for either of you, but it's just going to help you get unstuck from something.
Exactly. And I think you bring up a good point. Like, again, I go back to LinkedIn because I just love that platform. And it's something where you can create a content, like a post that creates value. And when you post it on LinkedIn and it helps other people, it's like the ripple effect. And it's just amazing because just because 5,000 people didn't hit like doesn't mean they didn't see it. Because when I travel, people will come up to me and say, "Oh, I saw this, or I saw that, or oh, I liked this or that." And they didn't call me, they didn't maybe comment, but they're seeing it. And
Hmm.
so that's what I love, is the potential is there for you to share your knowledge and help people. But essentially it's that front of mind, because I tell my clients, we're marketing a product and you're the product. But there are also times when you have to step back and say, you know what? My job in this scenario is to connect two people, and I have nothing to do with the outcome. I'm going to step back, but me just creating the introduction is helpful to those two people. And a lot of times people kind of go into networking thinking, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? When really it should be, okay, who do I know that can help this person if I can't personally? And then create that act of kindness, because even if it doesn't go anywhere, the fact that you offered to help that person, or offered to, I always say, hey, this may go somewhere, it may not, but I'd like to introduce you to this person. I think if you two knew each other, you guys could create some really cool opportunities together. And a lot of people, we're selfish by nature, right? We don't stop and think about that. And I think that's the sad part of, being a human being. So I always try to, every day I wake up and the first thing I do is I thank the universe for the gift I have to do the work that I love, that I used to hate, but I love now.
Right.
And I think about, like, I have a notebook that I keep all my success stories in. And so when I have those days where I just feel like, man, people are rejecting me, or I'm not getting where I need to go, I go back and I look at those stories and I think, okay, just this must not be the right door. This must not be the right opportunity. But it's kind of crazy. I do career coaching and networking coaching. And it's interesting because I write really great resumes using my IT recruiting experience. However, it might surprise your listeners that I have not had a paper resume since, and that is true,
Sorry,
because
say that again. You cut out for a
since,
second.
since 1992, I have not used a paper resume. I write them, I help my clients write them, but I don't have one myself, because every opportunity that I have had has come through my network. And so again, getting from point A to point B faster. Um, my my oldest son, we randomly went to Office Depot one day and ran into a young man and asked if they were hiring, and he said no, but I'm looking for a job, so I guess if I find a job, my job will be open. And it turns out he was looking for a tier one help desk position. And so my son's like, well, my mom's an IT recruiter. So I said to this young man, if I help you get a job, will you take my son's resume into the GM and help him get your job? And he said yes. So we ended up working together, and he ended up moving on. I helped him get a job. And then my son, he worked at that Office Depot for 2 years. And then LinkedIn sent me a notification that that guy had been promoted. And so I was like, congratulations on the promotion. And he said, how's your son doing? I said, well, he's looking for a tier one help desk position now. And he said, send me his resume. So my son was able to bump like 8 or 9 other candidates out of the way because he knew the guy that was hiring, and he ended up getting the job, and he just celebrated 3 years. It's an engineering firm. So again, my kids have it really good. They just don't know it
Right.
because, like every day, like I joke, like most people say milk or juice as their first word. My kids were saying networking was their first word, right? But they're learning about how to do these things. And I think for your listeners, the gift, whatever you're hearing today that helps you, share it with your kids. If you want to change the world, go home and love your kids, because if we can teach them these skills, it makes it easier for them when it's their time to do business. I wish I would have
Absolutely.
learned when I was younger.
Oh, tell me about it. So many things. And we're
Yeah,
we're trying to pass them along, and who knows, the world is changing quickly, so it may be all out of date by the time our kids are older, but it sounds like it worked out really well for your son, and that's awesome. And I think this kind of goes to what you said at the beginning, where you think you need your network when you're hunting for a job, but it's really something that you're doing all the time, and that it
right,
pays off all the time. It may not pay off as much as when that job opening comes up, like that's pretty special. But just
right.
having people, like the other day, I had a problem at work. It was an obscure thing that I just was stuck on. I was like, I know who to call about this. Half an hour later, problem solved.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's just fun, to see where it goes. I have a friend that's doing a TEDx next month, and he had reached out to me and said, hey, can I practice my TEDx on you? Because I also did a TEDx talk. And we were, no, I don't know why I didn't think of this before, but would you have time to come to Atlanta and speak at my leadership conference? And I looked at my schedule. I was like, I have 2 days open. And it turned into, now I'm going to Atlanta and I'm speaking at his leadership conference. And quite frankly, we're just busy by nature. So sometimes you have to be in the right place at the right time for those opportunities. So I tell people, and it's not scientific, but there is no right or wrong formula here. What works for me may not work for you or other people, but sometimes it's just a matter of just staying in connection and being front of mind so people can think of you, and then the opportunities come from there. And when you pay it forward, like in this case, coaching someone based on my experience going through the
Hmm.
TEDx talk, in gratitude, it was like, wow. And, I may not have been able to go to Atlanta because I may have had something crazy with my schedule, but he asked. And that's why I say go for the ask, because you never know. What's the worst that can happen? Someone says no, okay, move on. So,
That's exactly right. And I think we kind of build this up, and we often have these negative initial networking experiences like you and I both had. And I think it's like everything we do as humans, we suck at to begin with.
yeah,
Right? We can't walk, we can't talk, we can't do anything when we get here, really. And we have to learn and stumble. But as we get to be adults, we learn to look at people who do things really well and think, why am I not automatically doing that? And
right,
I think with your mnemonic of naked networking, we can adjust to some of those things that are going to confront us in these issues. And I love what you say about, this isn't something you do once a year at the giant conference. It's something you do 15 minutes a day, and it should be fun. It should be easy. And I love what you say about the tagline, because I think a lot of where people go wrong is they don't occupy space in anyone's mind. They're kind of generic and beige and corporate and jargony. And so people can't recall them. They can't refer them easily. And then
right,
people are like, well, gosh, I'm working really hard at networking and it's not paying off. Well, you're not occupying any space. You're just kind of floating through. So make sure you have that killer tagline. You can evolve it over time as needed. It doesn't have to be saving the world or curing cancer, just whatever it is that you do that you want to be remembered for. Make sure that's there. And then people, just like you are trying to make introductions for other people, people love to make introductions for you too, for the most part.
Your purpose, and it's interesting in this business, the smaller the niche, the bigger the opportunity. I have clients that are like, I only develop websites for people in the manufacturing field, or I have a client that only works with female entrepreneurs. So it's really interesting, and it's what helps you to be remembered, like branding. So I always wear black and orange. That's my thing everywhere I go. And so I've been places where they can't necessarily remember my name, but they're like, "You're the Orange Heels girl," and I'm like, "Yeah." So I tell all my clients, you are the brand. And what do you want to be known for? When you lean into your passion and you're giving your gifts to other people, people remember that. Maya Angelou said, people don't remember what you say or do. They remember how you make them feel.
Mhm.
And I think in the networking experience, you want people to feel valued. And when you have grace, because a lot of times people will come up to me and I can tell they're nervous, and you can just see the signs. I extend my hand and I'm like, "Hey, it's okay. I used to be nervous too. Let's just talk and have fun. It's going to be okay." And I think the more that we can be kind, if you can be anything in the world, be kind, and be kind to other people and help other people and look for opportunities that are missed by most to network and connect and help people. And then in turn, people will help you. And it's not a sign of weakness to ask for help. I think it's a sign of strength. So I encourage your audience to get curious, to go for the ask, to think about the 5 mistakes, the neglect, the afraid, the knowledge, the engage, and the dedicate, and really work on. In my keynote, I call it the hashtag Orange Heels. What is your orange heel? What is your barrier? There's a whole story behind that, but what is your barrier? Where do you need to do the most work? And then be willing to commit yourself to overcoming that barrier, that fear, so that you can get the best possible outcome. And I think one way to do that is to begin with the end in mind. So when you go somewhere or you meet someone, what is my best possible outcome? What am I hoping to achieve by meeting this person? And let that be your inspiration for doing the undesirable. So we have to do the undesirable to get the desirable in this world. So maybe the undesirable is that 10 or 15 seconds of awkwardness when you first
Mhm.
start talking to someone. But think about the goal and what you want to achieve, and let that drive you.
And I'd even add, like, if you hate going to these big networking things, what about the people that you networked with last year, 5 years ago, people you've known for years that maybe you're just overdue to talk to?
Right.
Wouldn't that be an easier conversation and maybe more rewarding? Just throwing that out there.
Absolutely. And while you're saying that, one thing that I suggest is when you go to these events, you know how they have the name tag with your name? Put something funny on there or interesting. So when I go to events, I say, "Ask me about naked networking." So come up with something that is creative to your business or your motif or whatever you're doing. And or ask me about my trip to Italy that I just got back from. And people appreciate that because they're like, "Oh, tell me, what does that mean?" And then the conversation can start from there. And that's where that commonality comes in. And so I think little tricks like that with your badge. I have a badge that says I talk to strangers. And so I
Nice.
wear that, and that's a conversation starter. So it's just, I think we just have to give ourselves permission to fail. And for me personally, failure has been my best teacher. Because I tell all my clients, you are going to fail. You are going to get rejected. People are going to be jerks. It is part of it, and it's okay. Our job is to find, our people. I'm not for everybody. And so we go out there and we do the best we can. And in the end, most people, I think, want to help. But you
So
have to have the courage to do it.
can I LTR that failure?
Yes,
Because
please.
I think I went through that thinking, oh, I didn't get the sale or this person wasn't very nice to me. That's a failure. And I think that's a lie. I think the truth is when you meet a bunch of people, you want to sort of just take a pass at understanding who are my people in this room. And some
Right.
of them are not my people. And knowing that is valuable, right?
Yes.
Like I don't want to talk to Doug anymore. He's a jerk.
Yeah.
Okay, now I know. And so the
Right. And that's your
reframe is
reframe.
it's
Yep.
it's a win that I have now classified Doug as he's either having a really bad day or he's just a jerk, and I just don't want to go near him anymore. I'm going to spend my time with other people. How did I do with LTR?
I think you did great. The only thing you missed was like the truth statement there. So the lie is, the voice in our head. And then if you want to take it a next step, where does that voice come from? Ooh, this is the yoga part of our session. I know where the voice is in my head. It's my mom. Growing up my whole life, it was, you're not enough, you're not enough, you're not enough. And I realized as I got older that she was just projecting.
Hmm.
But when you're young, you don't know. So I have clients who are like, oh, I can't ask for a meeting. I just met that person. And I'm like, whose voice is that? Why is that a trigger for you? Let's talk about that and let's explore it, because the truth statement is it's just a question. Let them decide if they want to have the meeting or not. And then recontextualizing is, hey, if I put it out there, nothing ventured, nothing gained, right? I think it was Wayne Gretzky that said you miss 100% of the shots you never take.
That's right.
So go for it and see what happens. And you've got a 50-50 chance. I'll take it. So you did a good job on the LTR.
All
Nice.
right. Thank you. Well, and I think you said something really important, right? Which is, as parents, our voice often becomes our kid's inner voice. And I
Yes.
have been trying very hard to do that in the right way. And of course, not succeeding 100% by any means, but I'm trying to be conscious of it. And I mean, this has been wonderful, Kari. And I feel like this topic, there's just so much to go into. You have so much insight here. We could go on for hours, but in the interest of our listeners and of getting you out of here, where can people find you if they want to find out more?
I think connect with me on LinkedIn, Kari Mirabal. My website is karimirabal.com. And you can put naked networking in quotes. Make sure you use the quotes on the website or you're going to get weird stuff. But if you type in naked networking, you'll find me. But yeah, I would love to answer questions or be of service to your viewers. So thank you for the opportunity to share just a little bit. My book is on Amazon. My TED Talk is out there. You can Google it. And there's additional tips and suggestions for how to network smarter. And if I can be of service, let me know.
Awesome. And we'll have links to all that in the show notes, of course. Thanks so much, Kari. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Drop an iTunes review or a review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you've got a friend who would benefit from this episode, let them know about it. If you've got a friend who wouldn't benefit from this episode, but you just haven't talked to for a while, now's a great time to give them a call. Thanks for listening. Until next time.